Today's class, graciously dedicated by Mr. Clemente Rahamim Beda Hamu Yakohen Le'ilui Nishmat, his beloved sister, Latife Bat Sara Aliyah Shalom. Additionally, today's class, graciously sponsored by Mr. A.B. Franco for the Refuah Shelema of Mr. Charlie Saka, Yeshaya Ben Lora, the Hashem give him Refuah Shelema among of the Holim of Am Israel. Additionally, today's class dedicated for the Refuah Shelema of Svetel Sara Bat Rachel Hinda and Abraham Ishaq Sahi Ben Aliza HaKohen En La Refanana Lahem Becheni Rason Ben Omar. Amen. Since yesterday I spoke about the powerful Shabbat about to start when it comes to 3 Sifrei Torah and the Zachut of the Petihat HaEchal. I'm not going to repeat it because it's in yesterday's recording. But I like to concentrate, with your permission, in 2 particular messages that the Perashah of this week delivers to us. So we discussed in the early part of the week the happy portion of the Perashah. I'm referring to the beginning of the Perashah. The beginning of the Perashah, as we know, discusses the concept of conceiving a child. From this Perashah, we learn that the Berit Milah is to be held at the 8th day of the birth of the child, providing that the child is in a healthy condition and gets an approval by the doctor, by the mohel, etc. And from the Perashah of today, we also learn that the Milah is done only during the daytime. And from the Perashah of today, we also learn that irrelevant what other date happens to be on the calendar, the Milah needs to be done Shabbat, Yom Tov, Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, etc. This is, and the purification process, obviously, of a wife when she gives birth to a boy or to a girl, etc. But after the first portion of the aliyot of this Shabbat, the Torah discusses a whole new, different topic, a topic known as Sara'at. Sara'at in English, as we know, means leprosy. Leprosy means a condition on the skin, and the Rambam Maimonides writes in this topic that this concept of Sara'at, it wasn't something that was medically being able to be healed. The Sara'at was a godly, divine punishment to a person that wasn't careful in the way they spoke. I'll bring you an example. Next Shabbat Torah portion is Mesorah. Mesorah means somebody with leprosy. The Zohar Kadosh says Mesorah means Motzi Ra, that a person who brings negative things from their mouth. You know that according to our tradition, how next week's Perashah it's called? It's not called Mesorah. You're going to read it in the schedule. We call it Perashat Tahor. Tahor. So if you see in the schedule Perashat Tahor, don't say, Rabbi, a mistake was made. We are humans, so we occasionally will make mistakes, and it's fine. We recognize the mistake, we fix it, and we move on. But when it comes to the title or the nickname of next week's Torah portion, it's called Tahor. Why? The Zohar Kadosh says that whenever you can avoid saying something negative or forbidden, you should avoid it. Now, and therefore, now that we understand this, just go through the Perashah. The Perashah talks about different skin conditions, and maybe medically there are names, but loosely translated, Sara'at means leprosy. But that leprosy didn't just happen overnight. Didn't happen overnight. It was a procedure. Hashem sends the person warning messages. You are not careful the way you speak. So who paid the price on the first warning? The walls of the home. Today you can call it mold. M-O-L-D. Think about it. Think about it. That's simple. God forbid. Or termites. Okay? Good point. Chazak. Could be. Yeah. Another case, next level, the garments of the person also get it affected by this. And every situation had a different remedy. In some cases, the remedy for the walls was knock down the wall. You can't fix mold 300 years ago. You knock down the wall, get rid of the garment. And if God forbid the person did not pay attention to this godly message, the way the Rambam calls it, then the Kohen will come, will check the skin discoloration of the person or the change of color in the face of the person or on the head of the person and the skin abrasions that occasionally may develop, and then the Kohen will determine if this person is considered someone afflicted by leprosy. But what was the requirement? That God forbid, if someone was determined to be a leper, I think it's called, then he will need to be in isolation, solitary confinement, quarantine, the way COVID reactivated this word. But I want you to know that quarantine, as I said in one of this week's classes, is sourced in this week's Torah portion. How much is quarantine? How many days is quarantine? Okay, depends who you ask. Hold on a minute. If you come to America and you bring raw fish or raw meats or raw animals or live animals, they need to put them quarantine 40 yom, 40 days. That's from the beginning of this week's parasha. 40 yom, 40 days. The wife carries a certain level of impurity. In the Mesorah, there were protocols. Number one, and I want you to listen to this hidush that's popping up at this minute as I'm speaking to you. I wasn't aware of this, what I'm going to say now, but suddenly I have an image in my brain of something that we learned last week concerning the Para Aduma, and I think that you're going to see the connection with the same clarity that I'm able to see it at this moment, with Hashem's help. This is your zechut. You're here, you inspire me, you give me hizuk to come and to speak, so I'll tell you what's going on in my brain at this moment. I'm going to take a pause, but I'm going to finish this sentence and then go back, okay? So, the Kohen checks the person. What the Kohen determines, is it a leopard or not? 7 days, michutz lamachane moshavo. Basically, what do? You move behind the fence. You go by yourself. You live in an isolation. No Guantanamo, just across the fence. And I don't mean Mexico, the border. I mean right here. Chutz lamachane moshavo, the pasuk says, let them relocate to the outskirts. And the reason is, if the person living surrounded by people wasn't careful with his mouth, let him digest what is going on in his body and in his neshama. Comes 7 days later, comes the Kohen and checks the person. Let me check. How you doing? I'm okay. How you handling it? I'm okay. Okay, let me check you. Oh, no changes. Stay another 7 days. Beizgiro HaKohen Shiv'at Yamim Shenit. Second time, 7 days. How much altogether? 14 days. Remember the stages of COVID?
Yeah.
Quarantine was how many days? 14. 14. Now, and the question is, why 7 and 7? Obviously, by the second time around, when a person was 14 days separated from society, separated from his wife and children, separated from the comfort of his home, obviously the teshuvah was coming, because the teshuvah was the direct reaction to determine if the person remained a mesorah or not. Maybe the person didn't learn the lesson the first 7 days. In 7 days, maybe he was stubborn. And then took another week, he lowered his head, he became more humble and changed. I'm going to pause this concept and I'm going to go to last week's Perashah Para. In last week's Sa'udah Shelishit, we discussed the protocol of the Para Aduma, the red heifer, right? And the Torah says there will be 2 procedures in a week's time. The process of purifying yourselves from an impurity of coming in contact with a dead corpse, or touching a dead corpse, or touching someone that touched a dead corpse prior to purification process, is a 7-day procedure. And there were 2 procedures that needed to be done at the 3rd day and at the 7th day. 3rd day, 7th day. And the question is, why? Although we don't have an open reason stated by the Torah by why the red heifer protocol is the way it is, the way we learned in last Friday's class, check the recording in itorah.com, look for the red heifer, and you'll get a lot of the answers to this question. Why the 3rd and the 7th? Why not the 2nd and the 5th? Monday and Thursday. So the Yirat Hashem answers this question, and it says as follows. We need to understand, he says, that the number 3 and 7 in the purification process of the red heifer, although it carries a physical action by the Kohen towards the person that is impure, sprinkling, etc., but parallel to the physical reaction or physical procedure, there is a spiritual exercise that needs to be reinforced. And this exercise is connected to the number 3 and to the number 7. The number 3, Yirat Hashem writes, and it says, our Torah, it's like a triangle. In what sense? Many matters related to Torah matters are connected to the number 3. For example, I'm going to throw in many examples very, very quick, since I'm talking to a wonderful audience and a devoted audience, so I don't think I have to explain each and every one of them, even though they are different in many aspects, but the common denominator is number 3. For example, Kohen, Levi, Israel, Abraham, Ishak, Yaakov, Torah, Nevi'im, Ketubim, Moshe, Aharon, Miriam. Making of a child, the Gemara writes, Shelosha Shutafim, husband, wife, and God. This is the triangle. The Torah writes an interesting pasuk, and it says, listen to the words. This one I will translate because it's not a very common verse that we learn. In Perashat Yitro, when God demonstrates and verbalizes his love to the Jewish people, Like a great rabbi from Israel says, if you don't say to your wife 10 times a day, I love you, maybe you should revisit your Shalom Bayit protocols.
10 times.
10 times. Because when you do something 10 times, you bring godliness. This was a side freebie for the wonderful audience. All right? Even though she knows that you love her, he says, but when the wife hears this from the husband, it makes a huge difference in her spirit. And since ladies are spiritual and emotional, words and compliments and good positive commentaries lift her spirit, and the opposite breaks her down. 10 times. How many people you need for a minyan? 10. When you have 10 people, God comes to the minyan. Correct? When you have 10 times I love you to your wife, God moves into your home. Easy. Cheaper than therapist. And more comfortable than going seeing the rabbi. Versteht? 10 times. But that was a freebie today. Because it's Friday special. Erev Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Let's continue. 3 people, as I said, in the creation of a person. God demonstrated His love to the Jewish people forever. But many times, the love that Hashem has for us is verbalized. One of them says, you will become a nation of priests and a holy nation. Right? Beautiful. Another pasuk says, you are my firstborn son. Beautiful. The third one, that's what we're going to discuss now, listen to the words. Bitemli segula mikol ha'amim. You will be a segula. What is the meaning of the word segula in Hebrew? I tell you one thing. A spiritual amulet. A spiritual benefit. We can even say it, my favorite nation. That is the basic meaning of this pasuk. But listen to this. The word segula, the root word of segula, is segol. Segol, although means purple in Hebrew, seba segol, but segol in Hebrew, it's also a vowel. The vowel that has a triangle, the 3 dots. When you look at the pasuk, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu, Elokeinu Melech, every time you say the vowel segol, segol represents the triangle. And what's the beauty of the triangle? Either way I look at it, the triangle remains the same shape. So the Yirat Hashem says, a person that is experiencing a process of impurity, he should revise his connection with God. Look at the Segol, he says. Look at Torah, Nevi'im, Ketubim. Look at Abraham, Ishaq, and Yaakov. Bond with God, he says. That's why he says spiritually, on the 3rd day of the Para Aduma, is a day of Heshbon HaNefesh, is a day of spiritual accountability and accounting to determine the purification process. Although today we don't have Para Aduma, but we have Teshuvah. Teshuvah, it's also part of the purification process. What about the 7th day? It says, what's so powerful about the 7th day? He says the 7th day represents the day of Shabbat Kodesh, the day that connects the person with Hashem. Every day you can connect with Hashem, but if you are not connected with Hashem on Shabbat, the connection on the weekday, it's like an airport connection. 15 minutes free, commercials every 10 minutes. If you want to have a normal Wi-Fi, you got to pay the price. So imagine yourself, you can be connected to the main hub of the Wi-Fi, or you get free, limited, non-commercial free usage of the Wi-Fi. He says, when a person, Shabbat Shalom, when the person reinforces the Shabbat, that brings purification to the neshama of the person, he says. But not only that, at this moment I think that is imperative that I tell you very quickly a powerful statement of the Talmud that says, Kol HaShomer Shabbat, a person that observes the Shabbat, afilu avad abodat zara kedor enosh, even if a person may have been involved in idolatry, yani the ultimate sin, a slap in the face of God, not in the Oscar guy. That's a different shi'ur. It's a whole mahloket. Relax. Yeah, don't worry about it.
You follow the news.
I better follow the news to a certain extent. That's a whole different shi'ur. And we have to learn a lesson from that. There is a mega lesson to learn from that unfortunate incident. From both sides. The positive and the negative. I will talk about it because it relates to the Zohar. Okay? About the incident that actually transpired. It's all written. You got to find it. That's all. That's why you come to the Torah class. Okay? Anyways, you'll see it in a few minutes. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. Commercial free. Okay? Beautiful. Anyways, so what happens? It says, the Gemara, if a person did Avodah Zarah, idolatry, that is a strike against God directly. Is a hit against Hashem. You're telling God, thank you, I found a better plan. I found a better option. That is one of the worst, God forbid, transgressions that a person can commit throughout their life. But you know what the Torah Gemara says? Okay, let's say that a person made this mistake. He did Avodah Zarah. What? We throw in the towel? The Gemara says no. Now, you have a poison, God forbid. You have a poison. You're infected by the sin of idolatry. You need the antidote. What is the antidote of Avodah Zarah? The Gemara explains, Shabbat. Enhancement of the observance of the Shabbat. Because if idolatry disconnects us from Hashem, Shabbat is the umbilical cord that connects us with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And that is the reason why many restrictions that we have on the day of Shabbat are established as a fence, right? To keep the sanctity of the Shabbat. One of them in the Halakha, it's called Obdin Dehol. Matters which are more suitable for a weekday. That's one title in the Talmud, in the Halakha rather. Another one is called Ziluta de Shabbat, the disrespecting of the Shabbat. And the Zohar now, I'm going to welcome the Zohar today, says very simple. What prompts, Mahila? What prompts the actions of the Sara'at? Leprosy. The Zohar answers, Motzi Ra. When you bring something negative, it doesn't say Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara is one of the tentacles of Motzi Ra. You curse someone, you also is an avon. You embarrass someone, you also is an avon. You lie to someone, that's also an avon. It's not like Lashon Hara is the only avon. No, Lashon Hara has partners. And that's why it's called Motzi Ra. It brings out evil from the person's mouth. And since we are Erev Rosh Chodesh Nisan, I'm going to bring you a short, small proof from Gemara Pesachim. I'm sure you heard of this. If you have not read the JSOR magazine of Pesach, you're going to see the article that I wrote. And part of the article is exactly what I'm going to say. You saw it? You like it?
Very nice.
Thank you,
Very nice.
Hazak. And thank you to the JSOR.
2 pages.
Yes, I got 2 front pages with a picture even. Sponsored by Charlie Saka.
Wow.
Hashem should give him refuah shelema among the Holim of Am Israel. Amen.
Amen.
Now, so I'll give you the short version. And my short version could be 10 minutes, but I'll keep it short and sweet. You know, I have a busy day in front of me. So I'll give you quickly. The Mishnah in Pesachim opening statement says, I'm going to say it in Hebrew, and then Be'ezat Hashem will translate, and you'll see how it makes sense. The question, sorry, Mahila, this is Wi-Fi, you see? Sometimes captures, sometimes not. Suddenly disappears, suddenly comes back. So the Gemara, the Mishnah rather begins. Listen to the words in Hebrew. I'm going to give you the very short version. Or le'arba'a asar bodkim et hames le'or haner. Literally, to the light of the 14th of Nisan, we search the hames with a candle. So the Gemara asks the following question. Shabbat shalom, good seeing you, boys. Thank you. My or, what is the meaning of the word or? Or means what in Hebrew?
Light.
Light. So is light day or light is night? If you're telling me that is daytime, why do I need a candle? If you're telling me, thank you, that is nighttime, why don't you start by telling me Leil Arba'a Asar, the night of the 14th of Nisan, you search with the candle? It's a good question, correct? Good question? You agree with the question? Do you understand the question? I repeat it quickly. Or, to the light of the 14th of Nisan, you search for the Hames with the candle. Ask the Gemara, what word is the light of the 14th? Does it mean daytime or nighttime? If I say to you, or, what do you understand? Daytime. Ask the Gemara, if it's daytime, why do you need a candle? Do I need a flashlight at this hour of the day? Do I need a candle at this hour of the day? I need a candle if it's dark. So if the word or means night, why don't you say the word Leil Arba'a Asar, the night of the 14th? After 2.5 pages, the Gemara says the following. You'll be shocked at the answer of the Gemara because it's a mega eye-opener. The Gemara says the word or means night. And the reason why we open the tractate of Pesachim with the word or, because le'olam, the Gemara writes, forever. No optional. Le'olam, yani till Mashiach comes. Al yotzi adam davar megune mipiv. Don't bring nothing negative out of your mouth. Now I ask you a question. Is the word night a negative word?
That's what I said.
Shabbat shalom aborach. Is the word night a negative word to say? Listen to the answer of the Gemara. Le'olam, forever. Don't bring something negative, unpleasant from your mouth. And what proof the Gemara brings? Perashat Noah. When God commands Noah take the animals to the teva, God gives Noah a prescription. Animals which are pure and animals which are not pure. Instead of saying pure, impure, God says which is not pure. In other words, somebody asks you, how is your day today? You can say bad, 3-letter word, or you can say could have been better. You're delivering a similar message, but in one way you use a shortcut, bad, tameh. Same example, tameh is a 3-word letter. Asher enena tehora is, I believe, 12 or 13 words, letters. So the Torah added extra letters in the Sefer Torah, not to say the word tameh, not to say the word impure. Do you get it? So, if just saying the word night, it's negative, and that's why in Hebrew, the true way of saying good night, you know how you say in Hebrew good night? No. That's the Hebrew language. The true spiritual way of saying good night is Betov Talinu. And you answer Berahamim Takisu. This is for the heavyweights. Betov, this is the VIP premium only, okay? But among the Hachamim and among the learned people, and I show you text and messages between different rabbis that I contact with, and you'll see it in the text. Betov Talinu Berahamim Takisu. Betov Talinu means with goodness, go to sleep. Berahamim Takisu, may you wake up with God's compassion. Takisu is for waking up. It's a very deep concept because Laila, I'm going to say it now, night represents darkness. And darkness represents the lack of light. Godliness is connected to the light. And depression, sadness, or the lack of godliness is connected to darkness. Sometimes people say the person is in a dark spot. What does that mean? Psychologically or emotionally saying dark spot. Unhappy. Depressed. Surrounded by darkness. When God comes in, darkness disappears. If we allow, so the essence of daytime and nighttime is not really so much the message of the Talmud. Yes, literally it means that, but you know what it means? Or the light of the Torah. You can search the Hames. Who is Hames? Hames is a nickname of the Yetzer Hara. So the Mishnah says, to the light, to the Torah of Erev Pesach, you get rid of the Yetzer Hara with the candle. It's a heavy. If I keep talking, you're going to start flying. What the Pasuk says, Kiner Mizvah Vetorah Or. You want the weapon of mass destruction? You need the candle, which is the mitzvot. You need the Torah, which is the fire that ignites the candles. Because the candle without fire has no purpose. And the fire without the candle cannot exist. The fire needs to connect to something physical. So from a Kabbalistic perspective, you know what this Mishnah is telling us? When you're going to burn the Hametz in Erev Pesach, have in mind also, get rid of the Hametz of your Neshama. You get rid of the Hametz of your home. That is the physical Hametz. Let's get rid of the spiritual Hametz. And by the way, this is the prayer that we say after the burning of the Hametz. And we say, may be the will of the Almighty, that the same way that I'm able to get rid of the Hametz physically, also allow me to, or help me to get rid of my spiritual Hametz that is engraved or injected into my heart. So even though Pesach is a physical holiday of soul and Hametz searching, but it's also a spiritual holiday of a cleanup process that we are able to do teshuvah, etc. Now, so the Zohar explains that the whole concept of the leprosy can be avoided depending on how the person speaks. And Lashon Hara is a given that is a very serious avon. Regretfully, Lashon Hara today doesn't need to be spoken, can be texted, can be posted, correct? A lot of social media does carry Lashon Hara, etc. And the Hafetz Haim quotes an interesting concept, and it says that how come today we don't have leprosy if Lashon Hara is so rampant throughout the world? Perhaps maybe 100 or 200 years ago, when communication and technology didn't exist to the way it is today, maybe Lashon Hara, you needed to see someone physically and talk to the person. But today, you can do it without leaving the comfort of your home. You can do it even in writing, you can record it, you can tape it, you can post it, so to speak, in all the different social media platforms. So it says, if the avon of Lashon Hara is so rampant in the world, how come we don't have leprosy activated? So he quotes, I believe, Shabbat Shalom, the Zohar Kadosh that says as follows, that Lashon Hara, if God forbid, after the destruction of the temple, people will be afflicted by leprosy, they will be separated from society and their family for the rest of their life. There is no purification process if we have no Bet HaMikdash, of course. We don't have, like the Para Aduma, we don't have. So what did God do? Out of love to the Jewish people, he traded in leprosy for financial problems. So it says in Hafetz Haim that many times financial hiccups and challenges develop in lieu of the Lashon Hara. The beautiful part of it is that financial problems can be fixed without the involvement of the Yetzer Hara, of Mehila, without the involvement of the Kohen Gadol. So how can you fix Parnasah problems? There are two basic answers. There are many more answers. Giving Ma'aser opens the doors. Observing Shabbat opens the doors. But there are two which are imperative also for them to have. How does a person talks? How does a person speaks? At all level, and how much you honor your wife. That's what the Gemara says. The Gemara says, respect your wives for you to become rich, because your wealth is to take care of her and your kids. But if you're not treating her properly, that develops sadness in her life. If she's sad because of verbal mistreatment, God forbid, then the beracha leaves the home.
Love also,
Excuse me?
anger.
Anger, of course, sure. But once a person talks in a way which is not proper and suitable, most likely is a good customer of anger. And once you have anger and foul language, vulgarity, cursing, belittling, condescending, the way the person talks, all these examples are connected. And that's the reason why when it comes to Shabbat, the challenge is even greater. No day of the week you can curse. No day of the week you can scream at someone. No day of the week you can mistreat people verbally. The Gemara actually labels verbal mistreatment is the worst of all kinds because it affects the spirit and the emotional well-being of the person. Screaming at somebody, yelling, belittling, in marriage means criticizing your wife. It's like you're putting salt on a wound. That's what the Shalom Bayit protocols describes. Okay? This is not a class of Shalom Bayit. No, what I'm trying to say is, but we cannot ignore the fact that so many things in our life are dependent on the way we just talk, the way we communicate. Now, the Gemara even says one more thing. And I brought you the proof from Pesach. Can you imagine one word, day or night? How much difference does it make? That the Torah is very careful of not having extra letters. And if God forbid the letter is missing, the whole Torah is pasul. If a letter is extra, the whole Torah is pasul. If a letter is cracked, the whole Torah is pasul. But yet in Perashat Noah, God says, on me add 8 or 9 letters. Why, God? You can say the word Tameh. Last week's Perashah, we say the word Tameh. This week's Perashah, we say the word Tameh. So why in Perashat Noah, you say, which is not pure, instead of saying Tameh? Short answer, because when it comes to kosher animals and non-kosher animals for consumption, the Torah must tell you it's impure. Because if I tell you, let's say, Rabbi, you come to me and you ask me, Rabbi, is this allowed to be done? So I can give you 3 different answers. Let's go with 2. Better not to, or not allowed. Which one is stronger?
Better not to.
No. Better not to, I'm telling you between the lines.
Not allowed.
No, that doesn't mean not allowed. Better not to means ideally don't do it. But if you do it, okay, we close our eyes. Or lenient. Or I say not allowed. So the not allowed is stronger, that is better not to. And that's what happens in Perashat Noah. Perashat Noah wasn't about the purity or impurity of a wife during the monthly cycle or during giving birth. And Perashat Shemini is telling us the kosher animals and the non-kosher animals. Therefore, the Torah must tell you, this is yes, this is no. It's like you fill up a form online. How many times they tell you, you must fill in all the blanks prior to moving to the next page. But Perashat Noah, it was only about survival of the animal kingdom. And remember one detail, that up to the flood of Noah, people were vegetarian. Meat was consumed post-Noah. And there are many reasons why that changed. It wasn't a godly commandment. It was a man-made commandment. But that's a different story. Let's talk about the incident of the slapping of the Oscar. Okay, you don't know? Chazaku Baruch. Better. I'm not have to go through the details. But we saw two individuals. One making fun, right? Lesanut. The Torah is against mockery. God despises mockery. Because mockery, lesanut, kills the spirit of the person. Maybe in the stand-up comedies, in the world clubs, whatever, comedians, maybe is an hour to have fun. From a Torah perspective, is asur. Is one of the four groups that God despises. One of the four groups of people, because, no, I understand that, but that joke hurts, embarrasses you, embarrasses the person publicly, even though the person may be laughing, but that laughter is external. Internally, the person's feelings are revolting. And when I say is one of the four groups that God despises, is one of them. So, comedy, is fun to laugh, but we need to be careful, God forbid, not to hurt others. And that's why in the religious world, you don't really have this kind of stand-up comedians. And even though some stand-up comedians are Jewish, but the vocabulary that they use and the commentaries that they make, it's not appropriate, it's not suitable. So this guy makes a comment about the other guy's wife. He starts cursing publicly. That's a whole different show. And then goes to the stage, right? I have people share with me information, and once people share it, I learn it. So you have to understand the lesson of that story. You have to understand the lessons. It's all over the world. I mean, you can't avoid it. Okay?
It's a lesson.
And it's a mistake and a lesson. First of all, you see the flaring of anger of one fellow. He goes to the stage and slaps the other guy. The other guy, what did he do?
He doesn't react.
Doesn't react. I know he's a Gentile and he's a comedian, but do you know what it means? In the face of the world, you don't react to a slap on the face publicly. Do you understand what that means from a Torah perspective? The Torah wants us to exercise self-control. And I'm not saying that it's automatic every time that a person will be able to exercise self-control and restraint. But guess what? This is part of Avodat Hashem. Not only that, it says in the Sefarim HaKedoshim that a person that doesn't react at the moment of argument, at the moment of anger from another person, etc., at that moment, whatever they pray for and whoever they bless, that blessing and that wish, it gets automatic approval. Automatic approval. Why? Because you did not proceed in continuing the mahloket. Can you imagine if the fellow that got slapped would have reacted physically and publicly? Would have been a mega mess at all levels. And again, I'm not justifying what transpired. The whole thing is taref from a Jewish perspective. The whole thing is inappropriate, etc. But look how two extremes the world is watching. The dangers of anger and cursing and the self-control. Now, do we learn from Goim? Because that's a question that's going to be coming up. Depends what? We don't learn Torah from Goim, but you can learn other things from Goyim. It's not a prohibition. You're not talking to them, you're not involving, you're just looking at the situation, which is going to bring a lot of things in the history of society and humanity. Penalties, restrictions, removal. It's a whole thing that the Hachamim of Hollywood will determine at the proper time. But the Metziut is that look at both extremes. And I'll finish with the following statement. When it comes to the essence, and we need to finish, when we come to the essence of the Shabbat, that's what I wanted to say a few moments ago, it says very clear that part of honoring the Shabbat, besides the actions and the ceremonial elegance of the Shabbat, there is a requirement on Shabbat on the topics that a person talks on Shabbat. What does it mean? That many of the topics which are permissible to talk on Shabbat, Mehila, on the weekday, business, investment, real estate, future planning, whatever, on Shabbat, these topics move to the side. And that's called Divrei Chol. And that's one of the messages also that the Zohar Kadosh brings. Why? Because the day of Shabbat is the day of connection with Hashem, with your family, with the community, with the Torah, and the mitzvot. So therefore, we don't welcome foreign topics which are not connected to any of the above. There is a time to discuss topics of business, and there is a time to discuss topics which don't affect the Kedusha, the sanctity of the Shabbat. Because even though a person may make an innocent statement, for example, let's bring a fictitious case scenario. Are you happy in the building that you move in? And then somebody says, it's a nice building, but the maintenance is too high. And then a third person says, how much is maintenance? Oh, $1,200 a month. $1,200 a month? Another building is cheaper. $1,200 a month is nothing. Across the street is almost double. Right? Is that correct? You talk to me about maintenance, I can give you guidelines as well. And reasons why. Association, assessments. By the way, once I was asked to intervene in an association matter many years ago. Yeah, Baruch Hashem, yeah. They tried to collect from somebody, and they asked me if I know the person. I said, I don't know the person. I'm sorry, don't get involved with that, Go through your proper protocols of the condominiums. Anyways, so look how a simple question, it became a whole conversation. And that's what the Zohar says. Shabbat is a moment of godliness and a moment of holiness. The same way we don't drive on Shabbat, we don't touch a cell phone on Shabbat, the same way we should be selective in the ways and in what we talk about on Shabbat Kodesh. Okay, my good friend? I wish everybody to have a Shabbat Shalom and Mevorach. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen. רבי חנניה בן הקשיא אומר, רצה הקדוש ברוך הוא לזכות את ישראל לפיכך הרבה להם תורה ומצוות שנאמר